The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
It might be August, but you know who doesn't care? Patrick Allvin, because he made some moves last August. And you know what? The Canucks got lots of forwards, and they could use some help on defense. Could Nils Hoglander help build the defense? What?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also a Canucks writer currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into today's episode, we got to thank you. I'm talking to you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks. You know why? Because it is your Canucks every damn day. We're part of that Locked On Podcast Network. They're doing the most for sports fans across the world. And for our show, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go like, subscribe, follow us for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you know what? We're not here without you, but we're also not here without the sponsors. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Someone has to have the title of the youngest player on the Canucks. And right now, last season, it was Nils Hoglander. And you know what? It is still Nils Hoglander, the youngest player on the Vancouver Canucks. And a guy with a ton of promise, too. But you look at the Canucks on the wings right now and at forward, and they're deep. They're deep, okay? The fact that they didn't re-sign Lindholm and Zadorov, and they were able to find some quality and quantity means that, you know, they got more wingers than they need. And a guy that would be an interesting trade chip is Nils Hoglander. Could he be a potential trade chip for your Vancouver Canucks? We'll get into that in today's episode and also talk about whether or not we think he's likely to be traded. Also, what does peak Hoglander look like, right? Because this guy is still only 23 years old. Theoretically, he's just entering his prime. All right. Nils Hoglander, an absolute beauty, but intrigue around this player in terms of where he could be, whether it's in Vancouver or elsewhere. Let's get into that. But before we do so, let me introduce my co-host. Is he fired up and locked and loaded? Kyle Bowen. How you doing, brother?
Locked and loaded, still 31 and a half years old. I'm still firm, bro. I'm still rock solid, man. I'm still built like a trunk, a baby elephant's trunk. But you know what I'm saying? I'm still built like one, man. Locked and loaded forever, man. Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen, Don't Doze Art Lab. What? That's the place, man, where we give you the West Coast bias. Speaking of which, Nils Hoglander, man. Do we have the Nils Hoglander bias? A part of me thinks we kind of do, because a part of me still wants to see this guy have more of a leash, more of an opportunity. And I know that sounds crazy, right? Because he played a lot of games last year. A lot of games. A ton of games. But there he was, right? When it mattered the most. And this happened, a game after he scored a goal, right? In Game 6, he scores a goal. But in Game 7, against the Oilers, when it mattered the most, who got the promotion? It was Ilya Mikheyev. It was a bit of PDG, too. You know what I'm saying? So there's still not that full trust in a guy like Nils Hoglander to be a legitimate top 6 threat. Now, on today's episode, I want to talk about Trevor's view on the full potentiality of that guy. Like, is there more than just a 24-goal, 11-assist type of guy? Is there room for this guy to have like some peak Victor Arvidsson type years? You know what I'm saying? Like those 30-goal type years. What do you see in the future of a guy that the Canucks should not trade in August for a like top 5 defenseman? Let's be honest. Let's be real.
Yeah, and honestly, I do think part of that reason is the fact that you wouldn't get full value for Nils Hoglander, but more on that in a little bit. Let's touch on the ceiling of Nils Hoglander, because I do think that you look at his skill set, and again, I think he's still figuring some things out at the NHL level, right? Like, you know, even though last season was I guess you could call his 4th season in the NHL, even though he spent most of last season in the AHL, it almost felt like he was kind of a rookie all over again, right? Because he has 2 seasons in the Dans and then spends most of the 2022-23 campaign in the AHL. That was like kind of a brand new Nils Hoglander last season. And, you know, if you look at his trajectory last season, like he absolutely pushed his way up the lineup. I mean, what were we saying back in November? What were the listeners here on Locked On saying back in November? Give Nils Hoglander more of an opportunity. And the guy, despite being in a fourth line role to start off, earned the right to be in the top 6 and played most of the latter half of the season in the top 6. So, I think he still has some work to do in his game. He's not going to be an elite all-star player, but Kyle, you dropped this name on the phone, Evan Rodriguez, when we were chatting earlier. And you look at a guy like Evan Rodriguez, who is a great middle 6 guy. You can move him up and down the lineup. He's super dependable, really reliable. He's definitely more reliable defensively than Nils Hoglander, but that's the kind of player that I do wonder if that is a peak for Hoglander. I don't think that's the sexiest peak by any means. I think there probably is another level there. Because look, this guy had 24 goals last season. All of them were at even strength, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he buried one power play one. But again, this is a guy who certainly has 30 goal potential in the NHL, which is something that's not easy to do.
Bro, and this may surprise you right here, right? And look at this comment from a guy like Stephen Wong, one of the coolest guys I know. I don't really know him, but I think I know him, okay? It's family over here on Locked On Canucks, okay? Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. But Stephen is saying, or asking this question, right? Could Nils Hoglander become somebody like a Brandon Hagel, right? And Brandon, this dude's, like, I'm not going to call him elite, but he's impactful, very impactful, a very talented player. Can Nils Hoglander be very impactful, a very good player? Can he capitalize off of what, Trevor? Off of what, okay? He's in his contract year. You know what I'm saying? And that's a big deal. People talk about big daddy energy. You know what I'm saying? You get a kid, next game, you're going to score a goal. How about contract year? That's every single game. You feel like you're going to score a goal because you could sign the biggest contract of your life. Speaking of which, is there a world? And this is crazy, but it's August. Do the Canucks pick Nils Hoglander over Brock Besser because of how good Nils Hoglander does this year?
Damn, that's something that's crazy to think about, right? I mean, I lean towards no, because you look at the season Hoglander had 24 goals, 36 points in 80 games. Again, despite being with limited ice time, might I add, he was definitely one of the most efficient goal scorers in the NHL last season. But Brock Besser, with the 40 goals, with the defensive prowess in his game, I mean, Nils Hoglander is not there. Now, could he get there? That's another story, because I don't think when Brock Besser broke into the league, we're just talking about his great defensive game. Now, he was playing on a brutal Canucks team when he started in the NHL, but which is part of the problem. Maybe that's an interesting question, right? Can Nils Hoglander get to Brock Besser's level? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think that peak Hoglander is something that we haven't seen close to being here yet. For real, because I look at a guy who's really good at forechecking, but not consistently forechecking. You know what I'm saying? I see a guy who's really skilled, but he doesn't display his skill full time. Like, he's bouncing around from being like a grinder to like, a guy with sick hands to being this POS, which I love. I love POS players, and that's why I want Hoglander to stick around for a long time. I look at the Canucks roster, and they got bigger, they got a little quicker, a more forward depth. But at the end of the day, if you look at who's the biggest POS, the biggest piece of shit on this team, it's Nils Hoglander. And I like that. And I want this guy to have a bigger role. It adds character. You talk about losing a guy like Nikita Zadorov. I know now we're talking completely different scenarios, but you want one of those guys who drives the other team crazy, absolutely crazy. And what if that same guy, again, can take his skill or take his offense to another level, which is, again, a little weird to say because he had 24 goals. But if you look at this guy's film in the past, now we're reaching. 17, 16-year-old Nils Hoglander, 18-year-old Nils Hoglander. Bro, there's a ceiling there with his offensive ability. And then you pair that up with Elias Pettersson, and again, we haven't seen that chemistry on a full-on display. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I didn't have these guys on the same line. I had Nils Hoglander in the fourth line. But I'm curious to just know if the Canucks do move off of Nils Hoglander, like, are they going to get hurt by it? Because when you start talking about what his ceiling could be, and you could do this with any player, but specifically with Nils Hoglander, if you talk about his ceiling and what he brings to the table, the piece of shit, the lacrosse goal, the forecheck, the hitting, like, look at that hit on Brandon Tanev last year. Yeah, you're talking about an outlier type of player and a player you want to keep.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting notion. Do the Canucks get hurt if they trade Nils Hoglander now? I think let's touch on that on the other side, because I'll bring up kind of, other defensemen maybe at the same value, and why I don't think a trade makes sense. I don't think you're going to get full value for Nils Hoglander is the main reason why I say don't trade him, because I think there's a world where the Canucks trade him and don't get hurt if they got fair value for him. But that's a different story. And I'll touch on one last thing. You mentioned Victor Arvidsson. I do think that is, in terms of the player archetype, in terms of what Victor Arvidsson did at the same age, I think that is peak Hoglander, right? Victor Arvidsson didn't have this kind of steady, slow rise like Hoglander's had. And I mean, obviously there were ups and downs of Hoglander's game, but Victor Arvidsson kind of went from a, scrappy, intriguing fourth line player putting up middling numbers to all of a sudden being a 30-goal, 60-point guy. Yeah. And he had that 30-goal, 60-point season and his age 23 turning 24-3 season, which is basically where the Nils Hoglander is right now. So if you're looking for peak Hoglander, maybe it's Victor Arvidsson. And for him to do that, that's a 30-goal, 60-point season next season. I think that's a high bar for Hoglander, but let's see if he can get there. All right. On the other side, let's talk about a Nils Hoglander trade, what it would look like, what's fair value, and why we think this trade is unlikely to happen. Before we do that, we got to pause for a break and shout at our friends over at eBay Motors. If you're an everydayer or an occasional listener, you know the deal by now. It's passion, it's drive, and it's patience. That's the formula for winning championships, just like my ball hockey team did last night, baby. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, excluding supply, eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
People, we back doing this, and that's giving you Locked On Canucks, man, the show that gives you your Canucks every day, a.k.a. we got to talk about that. We got to talk about that, man. We got to let the listeners know, man, that the ups in August are letting us go, what? 3 days a week. 3 days a week. They're giving us August. They're giving us our August back, right? They're like, oh, just take a break, guys. You guys have been working hard, okay? Do your thing. Take your time. So we only have to go 3 times a week next week. We're going to do that for you. But you know the deal, man. You know the deal. We're warming up for September. We're going to be back to full time in like 30 days. And also, you never know what's going to happen in August, right? Sometimes I get bored. Sometimes Trevor gets bored. And we just want to do the hardest job in the world, which is talk hockey, okay? For real. For real. Anyways, before we get to more Nils Hoglander, can we talk about this, okay? The hardest job in the world. Did you hear what happened with Jeff Merrick? Yeah. I want to know your thoughts. Apparently, again, working for Sportsnet, he has stricter, guidelines that he has to follow when it comes to who he can leak material to because of all the gambling relationships the NHL has with all these different gambling. What's the word? I'm trying to think of a word right here. Yeah. Okay. So apparently, I haven't read the full article, so I don't know if you have. I know you have the Athletic. Yeah. You have that Big Daddy energy, but was he like texting the wrong people picks that were going to be made? And is that like crossing the line considering that he works for Sportsnet? And again, you can put like money on picks now. Am I kind of reading that right?
So one of the interesting things about this situation, it's more about the broken trust more than anything, right? I know, Sportsnet, I guess, has a policy, or any media rights holder has a policy that you can't leak picks to outside parties. And it wasn't even for betting purposes. So apparently in this article, they were saying that, at least from the Nevada Gaming Board, that you can't bet on which team is going to select which player within 24 hours of the draft. So those bets have to be placed, 24 hours or more before the draft.
Whoa. So it wouldn't even matter.
Yeah,
so it wouldn't even matter.
That's a fair point, right? No one's profiting from what Jeff Merrick was doing. He had one buddy, apparently Mark Seidel, who's an independent scout. He was leaking the picks to him, and Mark Seidel was, posting on Twitter who he thought the pick was going to be, and he was like bang, 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 like right about everyone because Merrick was leaking him this stuff.
Wow.
And then he goes and deletes the post afterwards, right? So apparently Merrick was questioned by like NHL officials after the draft, and then kind of obviously we know a couple weeks later he was let go by Sportsnet. So I don't know. It is one of those situations where it's like he did something wrong, but did it really harm anybody? Did it really wreck integrity? I don't know. Again, he's definitely one of the GOAT broadcasters for sure. Like he's got that charismatic nature to him, and an encyclopedia of knowledge in his little hockey head there. So, but he broke rules, and I guess it depends how much you are a stickler for the rules and if you think that matters.
Yeah, and honestly, in this day and age, if you get like it's like if you become like an independent journalist with already that much of a quote unquote customer base, like the sky's the limit still for Jeff Merrick, I know like he's losing 32 thoughts and whatnot and Elliot Friedman and blah, 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 but he's still gonna find his way. Now, on that note, are Trevor and I going to 3 days a week because one of us is auditioning for 32 Thoughts, like to be the other co-host? You never know, man. You never know. Who knows what happens in life, man? Anyways, Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen, talking more about Nils Hoglander. Yes, Nils Hoglander. What's the deals with Nils? Man, oh man, I'm loving the comments because when I look at the comments here, you know what I'm seeing, bro? You know what I'm seeing? I'm seeing a lot of people have a lot of faith in a guy like Nils Hoglander. Okay, look at Infamous. Okay, it would be awesome if he could get 60 points. Look at Vancouver is my life. I think he caps at 35 goals. Again, we're talking about that Victor Arvidsson type life. Okay, Vancouver is my life. Again, with this comment, Hoglander is a beast and deserves more ice time. And SK93, man, saying again, Nils Hoglander is Victor Arvidsson. Okay, for quote unquote a quarter of the price. Maybe that's like a throwback Thursday type of comparison, but man, oh man, there's a lot of love for Nils Hoglander. And I wonder if the same is for Tocchet and Nils Hoglander, because again, I think one thing, and maybe this is why Rick Tocchet keeps talking about how he needs to get better, because there were instances last year where the coach of the year flat out got it wrong. He got it wrong many times, especially in the second half of the season. Okay. And one of the biggest mistakes he did make was, in my opinion, not given JT Miller and Elias Pettersson on that stacked first line in Game 7, Nils Hoglander. And they gave this guy a healthy scratch in Ilya Mikheyev, which was ridiculous.
Yeah. And again, I think Hoglander, as much as he gained trust during the regular season, he lost that trust come playoff time, right? And it was just, he was a bit invisible out there for a long stretch. So I got it. But again, for Tocchet to choose Mikheyev, who was absolutely ice cold over Hoglander in a prominent role, was definitely a galaxy brain decision. So, but I'm kind of curious, Kyle, on your thoughts. Like, what would a Nils Hoglander trade look like? And again, I always shout this out for about once every few episodes, but our friends over at hockeystatcards.com, they give a game score to every player. And Nils Hoglander's game score, if you look at how his game score compares to defensemen, he's basically worth the value of a top 4 defenseman. Hands down.
Whoa.
Like some of the guys who have, lower game scores than him include, like Brock Faber in Minnesota, Mackenzie Weegar in Calgary. Guys like, even if you look at Carolina, like he's right around like a Jalen Chatfield, right? Everyone in Carolina looks good statistically, but like Chatfield and Orlov would have the same value as Hoglander by that metric. So, I mean, is Nils Hoglander going to net you a top 4 defenseman in a trade? That I'm unsure of, because of the whole, he's a winger at the end of the day, right? And defensemen are valued more than wingers. So I think for me, that's why Nils Hoglander trade doesn't make sense. Now, Kyle, in a theoretical world, let's get a little dreamy here. In a theoretical world, if you could trade Nils Hoglander for maybe not quite Philip Hronek, let's say, but like a second pairing right shot defenseman who's young, would you do it?
Damn. Okay, you know what? That second pairing right-handed defenseman, in theory, would have to have the same amount of ceiling and also come off somewhat of a career year, Because again, you don't want to. Like, Hoglander did it last year. He did it. He took a step. The year before that, he was in the AHL. He learned a lot of lessons, and in limited ice time, this guy scored 24 even strength goals. That's not a small task for a team that's learning how to win. I know the Canucks were good last year, but they're learning how to win. They need good players, and Nils Hoglander is a good player. Look at this comment, SK93. You want to trade a guy who could possibly be the next Gustav Forsling?
It's a great point.
Hoglander's good,
point.
man. He has some of that pedigree, and like again, that's the only type of trade I think the Canucks would make with Hoglander, again, to improve their defense and maybe get somebody young to kind of bump Myers down the lineup. I think everyone can connect those dots. And again, the Canucks are not getting any more forwards. They signed 18 forwards this year, right? That's kind of where people's minds go if they're talking about a Nils Hoglander trade. But at the end of the day, I don't even see that guy available. And I'd much rather just see what you have in this guy, because things happen, man. I got to bring it up for the second time, but the Canucks score. Like, what if Hoglander scores another 20 plus even strength goals and then they can't sign Brock Besser? You know what I'm saying? They need guys who can score goals. And what if they give Hoglander more of an increased role at the age of 24 and he becomes into a way better player? So what's that saying, right? The hardest thing to do in the league is to score goals. Like, you don't want to let go of these guys, man. And again, the piece of shit attitude that this guy has, the way he plays, the tenacity, like, I think the more and more he plays and the more the NHL gets to watch him play and the players in the league get to see him play, they realize that, holy shit, like, we got to play this guy tonight. Like, they hate it. They hate it. And then he happens to score goals on you too. It's an outlier type of player. And in my opinion, a bit of a unicorn.
Well, he's still creative with the puck on a stick, right? Like, he's an interesting archetype because he's a crash the net kind of player, but he's got some of the best hands I've ever seen for a player who plays that style, right? And that's why, again, I think the Canucks are better off just believing in the player and seeing what he can do, especially right now with him on a bargain contract. And, you know, if we talk about trade potential, obviously the pros are the contract, the age, the scoring profile. But I do think some teams would have hesitation about trading for Nils Hoglander because they might go, hey, like, this guy, you know, sure, he was great last season, but he had an incredibly high shooting percentage. And, oh, yeah, the season before, he was mainly an AHLer. So I think there would be some hesitation for teams who, again, we're talking about them potentially giving up a young top four defenseman, right? Like, that is, if you're going to trade Nils Hoglander, that's got to be the return. And again, I think there'd be hesitation for most NHL GMs who are considering that trade to actually make that trade, right? And if you want to look at some of the defensemen who are the same age or around the same age as Nils Hoglander, like, these are some of the targets that I think, not to say they would make sense, but again, same age, you know, same kind of potential theoretically. You talk about like Matthias Samuelsson in Buffalo, a Keandre Miller with the New York Rangers, even like a Martin Fehervary in Washington, Mikey Anderson in LA, Henry Yogiharju in Buffalo, Timothy Liljegren in Toronto. Like, those are the guys around the same age who have top four potential, who could be like theoretically targets if you're going to trade Nils Hoglander. And I think all the guys I just mentioned, first of all, they're all pretty much left shot guys. And I know some of our commenters, smart people, believe that we need a left shot guy, not a right shot guy. I tend to disagree, especially in the short term. But if you're going to make that trade, it's like, I don't think the Rangers are giving up Keandre Miller for Nils Hoglander, even though, like, statistically, Nils Hoglander was way better last season. Keandre Miller was not a good even strength player. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I think, curious to hear if you're listening, leave us a comment. Do you think a Nils Hoglander trade is possible? Do you want to see it? And who could a target be in return? Because of all those names I just mentioned, guys, defensemen in the same age range as Hoglander, I wouldn't really want to give up Hoglander for any of those guys.
Yeah. And bro, to be honest, again, now I'm just pulling strings out of what's the quote?
You're pulling strings out of my ass. Wait, what?
Now I'm pulling strings out of your ass, or it's like shooting fish in the barrel. It's like shooting fish in the barrel, whatever that means. But okay, so if you go back to the 2019 draft and then you consider like how many first round picks we've traded in the last couple of years, right? The fact that there is still a chance that out of the 2019 draft, this team could still legitimately walk out of that with the top 6 player is so important, because there's a good chance Podkolzin isn't that guy, right? And like, who was the other guy they drafted? Like, who else did they draft in 2019? It was Hoglander, Podkolzin. Was that the, again, you know what I'm saying? And the more and more you look at things like that, if you want your team to be good for a long time, you got to develop your young players. That's one thing, but you also got to keep these guys. You got to keep these guys.
Yeah.
So it's one or the other, because if we're talking about Hoglander going, and then you fast forward a couple months and then you're thinking about Podkolzin going too, and it's like, Another one of those drafts, man. Another one of those drafts. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, Kyle Bauer, Trevor Beggs, loving everything. Nils Hoglander, loving the hog, man. Do you have a hog? I don't have a hog, man. I have a Tic Tac. I have a blueberry. I have a couple blueberries, man. That's what I have. What's a hog? Is that a pig?
Yeah.
Damn, bro. Pork. I got a pork. Anyways, Locked On Canucks, Kyle Bauer, Trevor Beggs at the Don't Those Art Lab. What are we going to talk about on the other side? Ball hockey championship, maybe. Your comments, maybe. Your maybe. What? How about this weekend? What are me and Trevor doing this weekend? All on the other side, okay? You're listening to Locked On Canucks. Who we shouting out?
All right, let's wrap up the show on the other side after we shout out our friends over at FanDuel. You and me, we both love sports. We love them so much that we never want them to stop. But we know the playoffs are gone, okay? But there's still Olympics on. And, if you're into the Olympics, or if you're like me and you're a CFL guy, not many of those guys out there anymore. But if you're a CFL guy, come on. You could bet on all that on FanDuel, okay? FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So make sure you head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer, okay? And I would have lost a few bucks on FanDuel last night because my BC Lions got shut out by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Whoa.
But that's all right. They're bouncing back next week. Again, go find your Olympic bets, your CFL bets on FanDuel. If you have gambling problems, make sure you go get help. Number to call is in the notes for this episode. Again, or we're brought to you by FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
We back doing this, talking about your Vancouver Canucks. My name is Kyle Bowen. That right there is Trevor Beggs. And I wasn't speaking English there at the end of the second segment, man. I'm just all over the place. This coffee's really hitting. It's our last full-time episode in quite some time. And I just wasn't making a lot of sense. Speaking of which, look at this. The 2019 NHL draft for your Vancouver Canucks and Jim Benning, okay? It went Podkolzin, Nils Hoglander, Kepin. Who the hell is Kepin?
Ethan Kepin, yeah.
Focht?
Yeah, Carson Focht.
Anyways, they got Shelovs too in that draft as well, okay? So Shelovs, Podkolzin, Hoglander still with the organization. Like, maybe the rest of the guys are too. I don't know. But those three guys with the big club. And you know what? Shelovs is still a backup. I love him. I love him. But for the next 2 years, he's still a backup. And it would be really nice if one of Podkolzin or Hoglander take another step. And I know Hoglander just scored 24 goals, but what if they take another step? The ceiling, the window, it becomes a lot bigger. Hey, speaking of the window, Trevor Beggs, man, again, it's August, man. It's August. Not a lot of hockey talk right now, right? And last time I checked, you're a ball hockey champion, man. Trevor Beggs, man, the Las Vegas Golden Knights-esque, okay? A bunch of misfits, a bunch of individual signups collaborate on a team. And for the first time in White Rock ball hockey history, a team full of misfits, again, individual signups pretty much win a championship, okay? So, Trevor, A, should ball hockey be in the Olympics? And B, how did you guys get this done, man?
Oh, hell yeah, it should be in the Olympics. Did I hear somewhere that it was actually in the Olympics like way back in the day? I could be wrong about that, but hell yeah, it should be in the Olympics, man. I know you made the comment to me. It's like, I don't know if your girl's going to like watching ball hockey. It's a bit chaotic, but I know I love the game, man. I love watching ball hockey. Like even when I'm at the rink, I'm watching other games go on. Look, with our team, man. So yeah, the league's been around for 14 years, and our team, the first ever team of individual signups to go forward and win it all, man. It was too much fun, buddy. But we just you get lucky, right? I think there's a reason why teams of individual signups don't win. It's like obviously you got other teams where the dudes know each other, they're friends, they're buddies, there's chemistry. And you get all these random guys. And I think with our team, we had a high floor, right? Just lots of guys who can run, like everyone can play. And obviously we made a couple changes, right? We have found a different goalie because we went from the worst goalie of all time to the best goalie of all time. And then other friends brought in some subs. We had a couple subs who are some of our best players. So, but it's a fun time, man. There's nothing like winning, okay? That's why we watch the Vancouver Canucks, right? We're addicted to this thing called winning. And when the Vancouver Canucks win that Stanley Cup, it's going to be so damn sweet, man. And me last night on a smaller level for us to win in overtime, like jumping over the bench, throwing your gloves and helmets in the air. Anyone who's played sports throughout their life can relate, man. It was a hell of a feeling, man.
Yeah, 100%. It just always reminds me that when the Canucks won the Stanley Cup, I'm gonna run down the street naked.
Yeah, I'll be there with you,
Uh,
buddy.
I'm
We'll
gonna
be
run
waving
down
our
the
Tic
street
Tacs
naked.
on the street.
I'm gonna be so confident, and I'm not gonna be scared of my Tic Tac, man.
Me neither, man.
Because
Neither.
I'm a champion. Because I'm a Stanley Cup champion. At that point, man, got nothing to be ashamed of. This is my body, bro. So I was born with this. You think I chose this life? You think I chose to be scared of rulers? Huh? You think come on, man. For real, man. Anyways, Kyle Bound, Trevor Beggs, Locked On Canucks. Let's get to some comments, man. For real. Gotta do it. Gotta do it. Okay, look at this. V to C with this comment. Okay, on a real contender, Hoglander is a third liner, if not a fourth line guy. He doesn't belong in the top six. Same for Garland. Canucks have four top six forwards, and that is if DeBrusque can prove he can play there consistently. Man, oh man. You know what though? I'm not gonna poo-poo on that comment because not only is he poo-pooing on Hoglander, he's poo-pooing on Jake DeBrusque, right? The 7-year guy. You know, the Canucks put all their eggs in their basket. We don't need Jake Ensel. We need Jake DeBrusque, right? At the end of the day, though, he's kind of right. He's kind of right. Until Jake DeBrusque proves that he's a top six type of guy for 82 games. I know the micro stats, the fancy stats, all this stuff. You know, if he can prove that he can stay healthy and contribute to Pettersson's ceiling, then yeah, he's then done it. He's evolved and he's a consistent force in the top six. But until then, I think it's safe to say that we really don't know what we have in Jake DeBrusque. Like there's a lot of good players in the league, but when you're giving a guy 7 years and you're in theory picking this guy over Gensel, whatever that means, like you kind of want this guy to be a grand slam too. You want this guy to evolve.
Yeah, I'm going to fire back that comment a bit because I think in a perfect world, yeah, shove everyone down the lineup. Let's have Hoglander. Let's have Garland. Let's have them all on the third and fourth lines. I mean, in reality, even with the Cup champions, that's not what happens. And, you know, we brought up the name Evan Rodriguez earlier in this episode. You want to know who arguably the sixth best forward was in the Panthers this season? It was Evan Rodriguez, both in terms of points and in terms of ice time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is Evan Rodriguez not a comparable for Hoglander? Is Connor Garland not in that same world as Evan Rodriguez? And I mean, again, we're talking about the Stanley Cup champions, a stacked team. But even if you want to look at the Edmonton Oilers, like obviously they have their makeup of the team's a bit different. They got some absolute star power at the top of the lineup. They got four forwards who are incredible. But look who else is in the top six. Like Evander Kane was in their top six and he sucked last year. Dylan Holloway was a young player who, although he's good, I'd say he's not as good as Nils Hoglander. He was in their top six for a long stretch, right? So this idea that Hoglander and Garland are top six players, I don't really agree with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and to be honest, what team in hockey, maybe the Oilers, but what team in hockey literally has the top two lines are full of you know what I'm saying? Like 1A/1B top six forwards. It's mostly like that, where the sixth guy is a Rodriguez in the playoffs when the games matter, you know? And that's the thing. It's one thing to have your lines look a certain way in the regular season where it's looking sexy, and if you're playing with this team in NHL or a video game, it's looking good. But in the playoffs, those players who are pieces of shit or hard to play against, who play a unicorn type of game because they can also contribute offensively, get bumped up the lineup and they play more. And we saw that in various points in the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, Evan Rodriguez, a big part of 2 victories for that club.
Yeah.
Outlier players can do that. They can just surprise you and shift a series. And man, oh man, I look at a guy like Nils Hoglander, and I'm definitely scared of trading this guy because I see a bit of a game breaker in him. And in playoff series, having a game breaker allows you to, win that extra game every once in a while.
Well, again, we mentioned this before. Everydayers know, occasional listeners might know as well. So many of this Canuck team, half the team was playing in their first playoff. They're really the first taste of playoff hockey, right? And Hoglander is one of those guys. And I think you and I were both talking back in April about Hoglander being the guy who maybe is going to score that game-winning goal. You know what I mean? And come up in a big clutch moment. And that certainly wasn't Nils Hoglander this postseason, but it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if he's that guy in the upcoming postseason. Now, I want to go in a different direction to end off the episode here. Stefan Johansson with the comment, I love our team, but can you tell me why the team is called the Canucks? Cheers. Now, this is an interesting one, and I'm pulling this from the BC Sports Hall of Fame website. Basically, Vancouver Canucks have been around since the 40s. playing in like different leagues, and obviously they ended up getting their NHL franchise 25 years later in 1970.
What?
But the owner at the time, named Coley, who names their kid Coley? Coley Hall won the rights to the Canucks franchise by winning a poker game. And then one day he was out for a stroll with his bookie, who suggested the Canuck moniker as a nod to the wartime comic book hero, Johnny Canuck. And since then, the Canuck name was born, thanks to a dude who won a poker game and a comic book character called Johnny Canuck.
Wow, dude. Okay. Johnny Canuck, man. A political figure. I didn't know Johnny Canuck was a political figure. I thought he was just a lumberman who loves chopping wood.
Yeah, he was a wartime comic book hero. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and told you I've read the comic book, but too busy watching Hoglander highlights.
Johnny Canuck and his hawk. What? Anyways, Kyle Bound, Trevor Beggs, Locked On Canucks, man. We did it, man. We went 5 days a week from September all the way to the end of July and early August. You know what the truth is too? We didn't have to go 5 days a week this week. Real talk. We didn't have to do episodes on Thursday and Friday, but you know what? We love the people, man. We love the people. We're not here without the people. We can't just disappear without communicating that. You know what I'm saying? On that note, again, next week, we're doing this 3 days a week. And if you guys have any topics you guys want to talk about, let us know in the comments, or more specifically, let us know in the Discord, okay? Join the Discord, link in the bio, hit the link, talk Canucks while you're on the toilet, give us some topics, produce these shows with us, and we'll see you next week. One love. Like the show, hit the subscribe button, give us a rating, a 5-star rating on those podcast platforms. Christmas is coming up, and happy wife, happy life, man. Trevor Beggs taught me that. And Trevor Beggs, sign us out.
All right, Locked On Canucks. You and I are living the dream, buddy. Shout out to the everydayers, the occasional listeners, the first-time listeners, the new subscribers, woo! And those of you who join us on the live show on YouTube. We love each and every one of you, your families, and your dogs too. Again, we did the 5 days a week for about 10 months there, 10 and a half, 11 months, who knows. We will be 3 days a week minimum from next week onwards to the middle of September. So a little break for Kyle now, but we still got you covered almost every damn day. But for now, we got to go. Have an awesome long weekend. We appreciate y'all. I'm Trevor Beggs. That guy's Kyle Bound. And you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Peace.